Most people think they know the story. A cheerful puppet carved from wood, a nose that grows whenever he lies, a gentle fairy guiding him toward becoming a real boy. It feels harmless, even comforting. Children laugh at Pinocchio's mistakes. Parents repeat the same lesson again and again. Tell the truth. Listen to your conscience. Everything will turn out fine. But the version most people know is not the one that first terrified readers. The original story was not a warm tale about honesty. It was something colder, something meant to frighten children into obedience. In the earliest telling, Pinocchio does not earn a happy ending. He dies, hung from a tree by criminals who leave the wooden puppet twisting slowly in the wind. No fairy saves him. No miracle arrives. The chapter ends with his body dangling in silence. For the readers who first encountered this story in the 19th century, Pinocchio was never a lovable character. He was a warning about disobedience, about temptation, about what could happen to children who ignored the rules of the adult world. To understand why such a dark story was written for children, you have to step back into the world that created it. Italy in the late 19th century was not the colourful place of postcards and tourist photos. It was a country still struggling to form its identity. Poverty spread through crowded streets. Factories swallowed young workers. Thousands of children wandered cities without schools, without protection, without a future anyone could clearly see. Pinocchio did not come from a magical forest. He came from that world, and the man who created him had seen its darkness firsthand. The puppet's creator was not a children's storyteller dreaming up whimsical adventures. His name was Carlo Collodi. He was born Carlo Lorenzini in Florence in 1826, in a country that did not yet fully exist. Italy at the time was divided into competing regions, each ruled by different powers. Political unrest simmered beneath everyday life. Collodi grew up surrounded by arguments about revolution and national identity. As a young man, he did not simply observe these tensions. He joined them. He fought in the wars that eventually unified Italy. War leaves marks that never quite disappear. Collodi returned from those conflicts with a sharp understanding of human weakness, ambition, and suffering. Instead of writing fairy tales, he began his career as a journalist. His early work was satire, political commentary, sharp criticism aimed at hypocrisy and corruption. His writing often carried a bitter edge, reflecting the frustrations of a country still struggling to stabilize itself. Florence during this time was filled with contrasts. Elegant buildings and wealthy families existed alongside grinding poverty. In the same streets where aristocrats strolled in fine clothing, barefoot children searched for scraps of food. Child labor was common. Many boys worked long hours in workshops or factories. Others joined gangs that survived through theft and petty crime. For many children, childhood itself barely existed. Collodi saw these realities every day. They shaped the way he thought about society, discipline, and responsibility. When he eventually turned toward writing for younger readers, he did not abandon his darker observations about the world. Pinocchio first appeared in 1881, not as a book but as a serialized story in a small Italian children's newspaper. It was called The Adventures of Pinocchio. At the time, it was meant to be short, a moral tale, something that would teach children the consequences of disobedience. But as the story unfolded week by week, readers began to realize something unsettling. This was no gentle fairy tale, and the puppet at the center of it was far from innocent. In the version most people know, Pinocchio begins his life as a curious child trapped in a wooden body. In the original story, his birth is far stranger. It begins with a piece of wood. Not ordinary wood. The carpenter who finds it quickly realizes something is wrong. The log laughs when he tries to cut it. It cries out when he touches it. The wood behaves like something alive long before it becomes a puppet. The carpenter, frightened by the strange piece of timber, gives it away to a poor woodcarver named Geppetto. Geppetto dreams of building a puppet that can dance, fight, and perform tricks. With that puppet, he hopes to earn money traveling from town to town. The old man is poor, hungry, and desperate for a small bit of luck, so he begins carving. The moment the puppet takes shape, something disturbing happens. Pinocchio immediately begins causing trouble. Before Geppetto can even finish carving his legs, the puppet insults him. The moment he can stand, he kicks his creator in the face and runs out the door. The very first thing Pinocchio does in the world is escape responsibility. He runs through the streets laughing while Geppetto chases after him. A crowd gathers. Instead of blaming the runaway puppet, the authorities assume the old man must be abusing the child. Geppetto is arrested. Pinocchio watches his creator being dragged away in handcuffs, then wanders off alone without a trace of guilt. From the beginning, the puppet is not portrayed as innocent or misunderstood. He is impulsive, selfish, dangerously naive. He ignores warnings. He follows strangers. He believes promises that are clearly traps. Carlo Collodi did not write Pinocchio as a sweet child learning lessons. He wrote him as a boy without discipline, a symbol of the kind of child many adults feared in 19th century society. In a time when survival often depended on obedience and hard work, a reckless child could easily destroy his own future. Pinocchio represents that danger, and in Collodi's world, mistakes rarely end gently. They bring consequences, often brutal ones. The further the story unfolds, the darker it becomes. Modern retellings soften the events. They remove the harshest moments. But in the original version, Pinocchio moves through a world where cruelty waits around every corner. One of the first victims of his temper is the talking cricket. The small insect appears in Pinocchio's home as a quiet voice of reason. He tries to warn the puppet that disobedience will lead to trouble. He tells him that lazy boys who refuse to study eventually grow up poor and miserable. Pinocchio does not appreciate the advice. He picks up a hammer and throws it. The cricket is crushed instantly against the wall. There is no apology, no moment of regret. Pinocchio simply shrugs and continues on his way. Later that same night, he falls asleep with his feet resting near a small fire. The flames slowly burn through the wooden legs Geppetto had carved for him. When he wakes up, his feet are gone. He cannot stand. He cannot walk. He sits helplessly on the floor until Geppetto returns from prison and carves him a new pair. The pattern repeats again and again. Pinocchio ignores warnings. He trusts obvious criminals. He runs away from school. Every time he chooses the easier path, the consequences grow worse. He is robbed by thieves. He is thrown into prison. He is nearly eaten by a monstrous sea creature. The world of Pinocchio offers no gentle protection. The most disturbing moment arrives in the chapter that was originally meant to end the story. Pinocchio is captured by two criminals disguised as assassins. They chase him through a forest until he collapses from exhaustion. The thieves tie a rope around his neck. Then they hang him from the branch of a tall tree. The puppet struggles as the rope tightens. His wooden body twists slowly in the wind. Collodi ends the chapter with a chilling line. The puppet's eyes grow dim. His legs stop kicking, and the little wooden boy hangs motionless beneath the branches. For the readers who followed the story week by week, this was the ending. Pinocchio's adventure concluded not with transformation, but with death. To understand why a children's story could end so brutally, you have to understand the world children were actually living in. Childhood in 19th century Italy was not protected. For many families, survival required every member to work. Boys as young as 7 or 8 were sent into workshops, fields, and factories. Long hours, dangerous conditions, and little education were common parts of life. School existed, but for poor families it was often a luxury. A child who did not work meant one less pair of hands helping the household survive. Cities were filled with wandering children who had lost parents to illness, poverty, or war. Some slept in abandoned buildings, others joined street gangs that survived through theft. Authorities feared these children, not out of compassion, but out of concern for social order. A generation growing up without discipline was seen as a threat to the fragile stability of the new Italian state. Newspapers at the time frequently described young criminals as signs of moral decay spreading through society. Collodi knew these fears well. Pinocchio reflects them with uncomfortable clarity. The puppet constantly refuses the path society expects him to follow. He runs away from school. He searches for shortcuts to wealth. He trusts strangers who promise easy rewards. Every time he ignores responsibility, disaster follows. This pattern was not accidental. Collodi wrote the story as a warning. In the world he knew, mistakes could not be easily undone. A wrong choice might lead to poverty, prison, or worse. Pinocchio's punishments may seem exaggerated, but the fear behind them was very real. A child without guidance, without discipline, without education could easily be swallowed by the harsh realities of the time. The puppet's journey through danger was not simply fantasy. It mirrored the anxieties of an entire society trying to control the uncertain future of its children. Among all the strange events in the story, one stands out as particularly unsettling. Pinocchio is invited to a place called the Land of Toys. At first, it sounds like paradise. There are no schools, no teachers, no rules. Children play all day. They shout, run, and laugh from morning until night. No one tells them to study. No one tells them to behave. For a boy who hates responsibility, it feels like freedom. Pinocchio eagerly joins the celebration. Days pass in endless games. Music fills the streets. Children climb trees, throw stones, and break anything they like. Then something begins to change. One boy wakes up with strange ears growing from the sides of his head. Another begins to feel a tail forming behind him. Their voices grow rough and uneven. Slowly, painfully, the children begin transforming. Their ears stretch longer, their faces twist, their voices turn into braying cries. They are becoming donkeys. The nightmare unfolds in silence at first, then panic spreads through the crowd. Children run through the streets screaming as their bodies change. But the horror does not end there. Once the transformation is complete, the donkeys are sold. Some are forced into circus performances. Others are sent to factories or mines where they are worked until exhaustion breaks them. The message is brutal. Children who refuse education, who spend their lives chasing pleasure and avoiding responsibility, eventually become beasts of burden. In Collodi's story, the punishment is not symbolic. It becomes physical. The dream of endless freedom reveals itself as a trap. And Pinocchio realizes too late that he has nearly destroyed himself again. As the chapters appeared in the children's newspaper week after week, the reaction from readers grew stronger. Children were fascinated. Adults were uneasy. Stories for young readers at the time often carried moral lessons, but Collodi's version felt unusually harsh. The dangers surrounding Pinocchio did not feel distant or magical. They felt close to the real struggles families recognized in their own lives. Parents saw something unsettling in the puppet's mistakes. Pinocchio ignored school. He chased quick money. He trusted charming strangers who promised an easy life. These were exactly the fears many adults already had about their own children growing up in a rapidly changing society. Italy had only recently become a unified nation. Cities were expanding, factories were spreading, old traditions were breaking apart while new systems struggled to replace them. In that unstable environment, education was seen as the only safe path forward. A child who refused school risked falling into poverty or crime. A boy who believed promises of quick wealth might easily be exploited. Pinocchio made those fears visible. Each time the puppet ignored advice, the world punished him. Each time he tried to escape responsibility, the consequences became more severe. Readers understood the pattern. This was not simply a fantasy adventure about a magical puppet. It was a distorted reflection of real life. The dangers in the story exaggerated the dangers already present in society. And perhaps that was why the story spread so quickly. Children were drawn to the chaos of Pinocchio's adventures. Adults recognized the warning behind them. The puppet's suffering mirrored the anxieties of a world where childhood was fragile and mistakes could shape an entire life. Nearly 60 years after the original story appeared, Pinocchio found a new audience. In 1940, Walt Disney released an animated film based on Collodi's book. The transformation was dramatic. The dark edges of the story were softened, the violence was reduced, the atmosphere shifted from grim warning to hopeful adventure. Pinocchio himself changed the most. In Collodi's version, he is reckless and selfish for much of the story. In the film, he becomes a naive but kind-hearted child, trying to understand the world. The talking cricket, once killed by a thrown hammer, returns as Jiminy Cricket, a cheerful guide who serves as Pinocchio's conscience. The terrifying moments remain in gentler form. The land of toys becomes Pleasure Island. Children still turn into donkeys, but the scene feels more like a thrilling scare than a brutal moral punishment. Even the darker dangers are balanced with warmth. Geppetto becomes a loving father figure. The Blue Fairy offers guidance and second chances. The story moves steadily toward redemption rather than despair. Disney's version became the one the world remembers. For generations of children, Pinocchio became a symbol of honesty and hope. But beneath that friendly surface lies the shadow of Collodi's original story. A story where mistakes lead to terrifying consequences. A story written in a time when fear was often considered the most powerful teacher. Behind the strange adventures and frightening punishments lies a deeper idea. Pinocchio begins as a puppet, a figure controlled by strings, moved by forces outside himself. His greatest wish is simple: to become a real boy. But Collodi's story suggests that becoming human requires more than simply coming alive. It requires responsibility, choice, the ability to resist temptation. Throughout the story, Pinocchio struggles with these ideas. He listens to the wrong voices. He believes easy promises. He runs away from difficult tasks. Again and again, he must face the consequences of those decisions. Slowly, painfully, he begins to change. Not because magic transforms him, but because experience forces him to grow. The puppet learns compassion when he finally cares for his aging father. He learns sacrifice when he works to support Geppetto. He learns honesty when he accepts responsibility for his mistakes. Only after that long journey does the miracle occur. Pinocchio wakes one morning to find his wooden body gone. In its place stands a real boy. The transformation feels less like a reward from magic and more like recognition of a difficult truth. Humanity is not given freely. It must be earned through struggle, through failure, through the slow process of learning how to live among others.